when we're calling B2B, the prospects are extremely busy because we know we're calling people at work, right? And especially you're a lot of the time you're going to be calling at the decision maker level. So these people are guaranteed to be extremely busy. I've seen a decision maker's calendar before, and it's just meeting after meeting after meeting. So a lot of times they're not even at their desk or in their office, and that's the phone number that you're calling them at. They never answer your call, and you think that they're avoiding you, but the reality is that they're in meetings all day long. And so you just got to keep that in mind, and that's a challenge that you face. Another thing is that there's a tremendous amount of competition, and that they get sales calls from a lot of salespeople. These are actually two different things. So you can just assume that there are other salespeople trying to call the same people you're calling, not only people that maybe sell exactly what you sell, but also people that sell something that has nothing to do with what you sell. They're trying to sell to the same person that you are. And in addition to that, it even goes beyond other salespeople. Because if you're calling a decision maker, there's also internal people that are trying to get to those people as well, right? So there's people that are trying to sell projects and get approval for projects. So there's a lot of noise, and a lot of that noise is salespeople, but these people are just being contacted all day long internally and externally, and that's a challenge for us. If we do kind of finally get through all that and we get a prospect on the phone, it's very likely that they are not in buying mode for what we sell when we connect with them. Could be some times where you time it perfectly right, but let's just say you sell you sell some sort of product and your prospect buys that product periodically. The odds are that they're not sitting there thinking, I wish someone would call me, or I wonder what the pricing is on this, or I wonder who some good vendors are for that. They're not thinking that at the exact same time they answer your call. So it's not to say that they can't be sold to, or don't need it, or won't buy it, but they're just not thinking of buying what you sell at the time they grab your call. Think of how that differs, like if you were at a storefront and someone walks in your store. You know that they're in buying mode. When you're doing phone prospecting, you don't have that dynamic. When you do reach a prospect, their guard is going to be at a medium level. And part of the reason is for those 2 points here, the two challenges. One is they're extremely busy, and then they're also getting contacted by salespeople every day. So if they do answer the phone and they don't know who you are, their guard is going to be at a medium level. And everything you do and say will either make their guard go up, or it'll make their guard go down, or it might make their guard just stay where it is. So that's a challenge. Dealing with the guardedness and the buying mode is when we're lucky enough to get them on the phone. The reality is that prospects don't answer their phone a whole lot. Either they're, like I said, they're in meetings all day, or they just let all their calls go to voicemail, or they put prospects in between them and you. And they do that on purpose. They forward their direct phone number to a front desk or to an administrative assistant. So those are the challenges that are there. If this was a more interactive session, I would say, do you guys agree with that? Do you have anything to add to that list? But I'm pretty confident from my own experience that that's a pretty good list of challenges that you all might experience those too. And so that's what we have to deal with. And when someone says cold calling is dead or cold calling doesn't work, well, one thing, they could be looking at that list and say, that's just too tough. That's too difficult, so I'm not going to do it. And that's the choice you have. Is that the thing is that you can't make these challenges go away. There's nothing you can do to make a prospect less busy. There's nothing you can do to force someone to answer their phone. So there's nothing you can do to make these challenges go away. Your choices are, do I not pick up the phone and call people because this is a difficult environment? Or are there things I can do to decrease these challenges, to mitigate these challenges, to work around these challenges? And so that's what I'm going to show you here today, is that we're going to go through each of these one at a time. And that's the way I see things. I don't know whether you've gathered this from our other training modules or not, is that, instead of just like trying to pump you up and say, you can do it, you have what's inside you, you got to work when your competition is sleeping, you got to be hungrier than everyone else. I'm not real big on giving you motivation. I assume you're motivated and you want to succeed. So my approach is, let's break it down. Let's see what is standing in your way piece by piece and deal with that piece by piece. If I can give you tips to decrease each of these challenges, in theory, that should make these challenges less. If I make these challenges less for you, then you will be more successful. And I feel fairly confident in that assumption. So that's our approach here today, and let's just go through these one at a time, starting with prospects are extremely busy. We know that they're busy, so what are we going to do to counter that? Well, you know what? We're going to have to call someone a whole lot. Not just call them. We're going to have to email them. We're going to leave them voicemails. Not only are we going to leave them voicemails periodically, we're going to follow up our voicemails with emails. So we're going to just contact this person a lot. And the reason why is because we know they're busy. So if the decision maker is never at their desk and they're in meetings all day, then we're going to have to call them a lot. And so the thing about that is to, first of all, it's starting with an awareness that the prospect is busy, and that's why they're not calling us. Because if you don't have that awareness, then you might actually have this sort of insecurity to where you think, I've called this person 4 times, they're not answering my call, they're avoiding me, or they're not interested, so I'm going to move on to someone else. So the reality is that that awareness can tell us to not assume that the prospect is not interested because they're not returning our voicemail and they're not responding to our email. They might not be responding and answering our call because they're extremely busy. And so we just need to keep calling them. And it's not that we're a bad salesperson or we're not doing a good job. These people are busy. So we're going to use a multi-touch approach using different methods of communication, and we're going to use those methods a lot. And so here's a diagram that we call this our call cadence workflow. And I'm not going to go through this here today. I've done that in another sales training webinar that we've done. But this basically has 4 different rounds of calls and emails and voicemails, and there's some logic here that if they don't answer and it's the first call, you send them an email, then you follow up the email with a call, then you leave a voicemail. What I want you to take, if you're just looking at this workflow, is that there's a lot of different attempts before we write this person off as, okay, we've done our part. And even some of these boxes, you might see, okay, there's a lot of different boxes here, but some of the boxes even say call 5 to 10 times, so there's a lot of attempts here that we want to do. We're still dealing with the challenge that we're assuming and we know that our prospects are extremely busy. So what does that mean? If they're busy, then we're communicating with them, then we need to communicate with them in a very concise and powerful message. Let me give you one quick example. So if we're creating an email that we're sending to our prospect, then we need to use a short email versus a long one, because if our prospect is busy, they're more likely to delete an email unread if there's a bunch of text there. And so if we can have a very concise message, then we can improve the odds of our message being looked at versus being instantly deleted. And since our prospects are very busy and it's going to take us maybe some time to get a hold of them, we might want to try to educate them through multiple messages, meaning multiple voicemails, multiple emails, multiple voicemail follow-up emails, and educate them on the improvements we could possibly help them to make, the problems we might be able to help to fix for them, ways we differ from other options out there, the ROI we can deliver them. So again, I'm still going to point you to some other webinars here as we go through these challenges, but right there I was talking about creating a very concise and powerful pitch, and that can help with communicating and connecting with prospects that are extremely busy and just have a very limited amount of attention. And so here's a webinar recording on how to build a strong sales pitch, and so that can help you with creating your messaging that you can use when you call, when you email, when you leave voicemails. Moving on to the next one, and that is that we know that our prospects are getting approached a lot by other salespeople. So what I want you to do is if your prospect is constantly getting voicemails, emails from people saying, hey, I have this product to sell, I want you to buy my product, and then if you call them and you say, I have this product to sell, I want you to buy my product, call me back, and of course you wouldn't say those exact words, but believe it or not, most salespeople actually sound like that. And so what I want you to do is to try to minimize how much you sound like a salesperson that's trying to sell something. And so you might think, well, but I am a salesperson trying to sell something, so how can I do that? Do I lie and pretend like I'm doing something else? And the answer is no. But there are things you can do to sound more like a business person or more like a consultant or an advisor than a pushy salesperson trying to sell something. I mean, if you think about it, you can legitimately sound like a person that's representing an organization that wants to do business with another organization, and that would involve, at the end of the day, a transaction where something's bought and sold, and you represent all of that, and you're the person that they would work with. That is something different than I'm a product pushing salesperson that wants to talk you into buying something that I want to sell and I want to make money from selling to you. Those are two different things, even knowing at the end of the day that's the exact same. Those two different people hold the same exact position. And so the one that is on the latter side that I shared with you is a product selling salesperson. And these are the people that as soon as they talk to a prospect, they're all about talking about the products they sell. They're about talking about the company they work for. They're always trying to sell the product. Meaning in every conversation they're trying to sell the product, even if it's a long sales cycle where you don't sell the product in the first conversation, they're still trying to talk the prospect into wanting the product every step of the way. The salesperson does most of the talking when they are doing more of a product selling approach. The pitch centers around explaining what the product does, describing the product, trying to make the prospect interested in the product. And so they're always, again, trying to make the prospect interested. So that's what I would call product selling. I think that probably 90%, if not more, salespeople out there use a product selling approach. What we would want you to do, and this will help you to sound more like a business person, is to have a consultative selling approach. And it really just does the opposite of everything that I just talked about. Instead of talking about the products, talk about the improvements that you can make for the prospect, and that's typically using your product, but focus on the improvements. Talk about helping the prospect to fix their problems and what problems you can fix, and again, that's typically using your product, but it's more focusing on the problems. Ask good questions to see if the prospect has the problems that you can help to fix. So a consultative salesperson is going to ask good questions, and because you're asking good questions, you're going to end up doing most or an equal amount of talking. And the pitch centers around good questions, and again, you're talking about benefits, problems, ROI, and whatnot. So again, we're talking about making phone prospecting more successful. So this is, you're reaching out to prospects, and either they're answering your phone and this is what you're doing when you're talking to them, or this can also impact the emails that you send and the voicemail messages that you leave. But if you sound more like a consultative selling person versus a product selling person, you're going to decrease emails being deleted unread. You're going to get more of an ear when you're leaving a voicemail message, when you do end up getting on the phone with them. So if we can sound more like a business person, then we're going to stand out from all those different salespeople. Consultative selling is a whole subject in itself. Here's a webinar that we did on how to be a consultative salesperson. So the prospect, we talked about, if we are fortunate enough to get them on the phone, it's very likely that they're not going to be in buying mode. So, an example of this, every business purchases, let's say, accounting services and uses an accounting firm or a CPA. Well, think about a person trying to sell that service. Yes, I use an accounting firm, and that might change from time to time, but when I receive your email or your call, I am not in buying mode looking to change. It's very likely I'm not looking to change firms. So what I would tell you is that instead of trying to sell the product, even though we were just talking about don't be a product pusher, but there are times where you might end up in a conversation where you are actually trying to worry about selling the product. And what I would say to you is if you look at the different steps in a typical sales process, you can very easily fall into trying to sell the product in that first conversation, which would be the first initial contact, which could be your email or your voicemail or your phone if you get them on the phone. And so don't try to sell the product in that first stage because they're not in buying mode. So if I call you up and I'm trying to sell you accounting services and you're not in buying mode to purchase accounting services, then you arrive at a no a lot easier and quicker. No, I'm not looking at buying accounting services. So instead of selling the product, sell the conversation. Right here it says sell the meeting, but actually sell the conversation. So yes, you might not be buying, but that doesn't mean that you're not interested in having a conversation around accounting services, around challenges that you might have with your existing firm, around improvements that you need to make around your reporting or your accounting. Focus on setting the appointment, scheduling the meeting versus selling the product. And another thing, again, we're dealing with the challenge here that the prospect's not in buying mode when we do connect with them. And if you do connect with them, and they're not in buying mode, and you have that product selling mentality, you're likely to hear objections like this: I'm not interested. We do not have budget right now. We're not looking at making any changes right now. We already used somebody for that. Call me back in X months. So if you're selling the product, you don't really have a response for this. If they don't have budget and I want to sell the product, then that's a significant reason for us not to meet. Because why would I meet with you if you can't buy what I sell? But if I'm trying to just start the conversation, the fact that you don't have budget is irrelevant. Okay, well, I'm not trying to sign you up for anything. I'm looking to have an introductory conversation, learn a little bit about you, share with you a little bit how we helped businesses like yours, and it'll be a brief conversation, and we won't have the expectation that you're going to buy anything. But maybe then when your budget opens up or when you're in your next year planning, you can know how we can fit into your plans or what we could offer. That way, when your budget does open up, we can come back to the table and you can keep us in mind. So from our standpoint, it would be very productive. So that's a response that you could give to that objection if you're not selling the product but you're selling the meeting. So you be prepared for these objections, and we do have information for you to work on your objection handling. It's a whole subject in itself. So here's a webinar on how to deal with objections. Check that out, and it'll go through those objections that I just shared with you, which will help you with the prospect not being in buying mode and maybe giving you some objections. We talked about your prospects get a lot of calls from salespeople and that they're extremely busy, and that makes their guard at a medium level. So again, and this is where some of the tips are, you'll see them twice because they impact in different ways, but this is where we'll again emphasize the point to not sound like a salesperson. When you sound like a salesperson, that their guardedness will go up. So they answer your call and you start talking about your product, you start talking about your company, they think, oh geez, why did I answer this call? Another salesperson trying to talk me into something, and they're going to start to give you objections, try to get off the phone with you. And it's instances like that when you do that, then you end up getting shut down, hung up on, whatever. Then you start to feel like cold calling does not work. And that's where you might start to believe in those debates that cold calling is dead. But if you decrease how much you sound like a salesperson, you can decrease the guard going up, and then that can improve your ability to establish conversations and whatnot. So one way to decrease the guardedness going up is what we just talked about there, being more of a consultative salesperson versus a product selling will help there. Here are a couple other things though. One thing, and I don't have enough time to get into this in more detail, so I don't know if this will really resonate or make sense to you, but in my inside sales operations, and I used to have a cold calling outsourcing business, so we did cold calling for other companies. I had a whole team of people, and we always asked this question at the beginning of every call, and it's it's to confirm availability, but it's also a pattern interrupt. And so I don't know if you know what the term pattern interrupt is. You can look it up, but it's a psychological tactic to, and this question actually serves as that, which is to ask, have I caught you in the middle of anything? And so this is a very different question than most salespeople ask. Most salespeople ask, how are you doing today? So as soon as you ask, how are you doing today, you start to trigger that, oh, this sounds like a salesperson trying to sell to me. And so if you change that to, have I caught you in the middle of anything, you're actually triggering a pattern interrupt. You're confirming availability. It sounds very familiar. And so I've listened to hundreds, maybe more calls where my salespeople always ask this question. And it's amazing how people decrease their guardedness, or for sure they don't trigger more guardedness when you ask this question at the beginning of a call. The other subtle tactic is that right after you confirm availability, or actually it's right after you deliver your value statement, is to deliver a soft disqualifier, soft takeaway, which is to say something. So an example of this might be where if I use my value statement, I might say something like, I help inside sales managers to shorten the amount of time it takes to train new reps. And then now I'm going to use this soft takeaway, soft disqualify. But you know what? I don't know if you're a good fit for what we do. So that's an example of like a push-pull. It's a disqualify. So and to do that at the beginning of a call will decrease someone's guardedness. So you're doing the exact opposite of what typical salespeople do. Product pushing salespeople will say, you need this, you want this, you got to take a look at this. A consultative salesperson might question whether or not they fit well. So there's actually a full webinar on doing a takeaway, and so check that out. Here's a link, and I can't get into that in more detail, but those are some things to help with that particular challenge of people being guardedness, some small changes that you can make. So because of some of these other challenges, we know that prospects don't answer their phone a whole lot. Either they're away from their desk, and again, so using some sort of call cadence, a level of persistence, don't assume they're not interested because they're not asking. A lot of touches will help with that. And the last challenge is that prospects put gatekeepers in your way, and this is a fact, right? So, and this is a result of some of these other challenges. Prospects get so many calls from salespeople that they put someone else to deal with that, and that person is a gatekeeper, and that person has the objective of getting rid of you. And so the thing is that if you stop to think about how much time you might spend dealing with gatekeepers, I don't know. I mean, I've just done some estimates, but I think that it could be where you spend half your phone prospecting time dealing with gatekeepers. So whether that's if you spend 2 hours a day dealing phone prospecting, 10 hours a week, 2 hours a week, whatever it is, you could assume that half that time is going to be having your phone calls answered by gatekeepers. So that is what it is. Like I said, this is a challenge. There's nothing we can do to change that. I mean, you can say, one thing that you can do is you can try to get direct phone numbers proactively instead of main switchboard numbers. So that could help you to decrease that challenge technically. But even when you have direct dials for decision makers, a lot of times those phones get routed to administrative assistants, which serve as a gatekeeper. So the point is that this is a challenge that stands in your way, and because it's such a large percentage, it can be beneficial and helpful for you to improve your ability to decrease and deal with this challenge. And there are some things that you can do to make this less difficult. I mean, let's face it, some gatekeepers are just difficult, and there's nothing you can do to get past them. But instead of just trying to power your way through or improvise and do something different every time a gatekeeper answers, there is some logic that you can apply that can improve your ability over a large number of calls to improve the rate of them letting you in or giving you information or passing you through. I can't go into full explanation on how to deal with gatekeepers, but I just want to give a few tips here. The first one is to start with understanding the gatekeeper. And the key thing here is that the gatekeeper in most cases has been given the objective to keep a salesperson out. Just like you have the objective of getting to the decision maker and getting the decision maker on the phone so that you can reach your targets of either setting appointments or selling deals, the gatekeeper has the objective of keeping salespeople out. And there's many instances where if they let you in, they're actually going to get in trouble. So, it's sort of like, just like you might get in trouble formally or informally if you can't get past gatekeepers, they could get in trouble if you do. So you kind of have this, you're at odds, and you have different objectives and different interests. So that is what it is. So that's the first thing that you should kind of be aware of when you're dealing with these people when they're being difficult. And there's some things that you can do there to build a relationship and to work around them. I'll point you to more information on that, but one thing that you could do is you should prepare for 8 gatekeeper objections. So just a quick example, the most common gatekeeper objection is, what is this call in regards to? So they're going to ask that, just looking for the clear flag that you're a salesperson. As soon as they know you're a salesperson, then they'll know to shut you down with, we're not interested, let me put you into a supplier or vendor voicemail box, just send me your information. So you should be able to deal with that objection, and we actually provide a way to deal with that. And the tip we provide is to say your value statement. So because that it's just sort of like a curveball, and the gatekeeper doesn't know what to do with that. So if a gatekeeper says to me, what's this call in regards to? Oh, well, the reason why I'm reaching out is I help sales managers to decrease their rate of sales staff turnover. And I just sit there. And the gatekeeper doesn't know what to do with that. It's sort of like a robot who is their computer code has a glitch, and they start not knowing what to do and bouncing in place. That's what your gatekeeper will do, because they won't be able to know, because it doesn't give them the flag of, I'm a salesperson. You sound like a consultant or an advisor, right? So they might not pass you through and say, oh, you do, well, let me connect you with Jimmy, but they're not going to have that instant response of, oh, we're not interested. And it's hard to say we're not interested if you say a value point, because it's sort of like saying, hey, I help people to make more money. Oh, I'm not interested in making more money. Even knowing you're not interested in taking the call, it doesn't make sense for you to say you're not interested in that particular point. Anyways, so that's just a glimpse of what you can do with objection handling. You treat the gatekeeper like a prospect if they start, blocking you out. And you can do that by, typically we want you to ask your prospect questions in your consultative selling approach. So if the gatekeeper blocks you out, well, start asking your gatekeeper some of your probing questions. This can do a few things. One is, depending on the gatekeeper, they may have a lot of really valuable information. So why not, if they're not going to pass you through, get some information out of them. And also, if they don't have any information or answers to your questions, that could help you to maybe find a reason for them to let you in, or help you to explain why it makes sense for you to talk to the person you're trying to reach. Now, we do have a full webinar on how to get around gatekeepers, and you can get to that here. So be sure to check that out.